Joining us right now to talk about how companies can reposition themselves in a rising rate environment is Bill George. He is Harvard Business School professor and the former chairman and CEO of Medtronic. And Bill, these rate hikes are coming. They're coming slow, but what do companies need to start thinking about right now?
Well, I think this is the most over-anticipated move in history. I think the companies are fully prepared, Becky, to make the move. And I was pleased that she laid out a steady progression. We've got to get back to a more normalized economy and our normalized interest rates, because the extremely low interest rates can lead to bad things. And so I think companies will adapt quite easily. The only concern I have is that it probably will raise the value of the U.S. dollar. And if you're looking at constant currency, it's not a problem. But if you're looking in actual as reported, you're going to see some larger currency negatives coming in.
What should companies start doing? We know that companies in the zero interest rate environment have done things like load up on debt because they can get it for basically free.
Yeah.
They've been buying back a ton of shares. We have seen mergers and acquisition activity kind of pick up. What is going to change, or is anything going to change with a quarter point rate hike?
I've always felt that the real test of any company is the organic growth, and they got to focus on that. They have to invest. A quarter of a point doesn't mean very much. Even the coming percentages, I think they need to move now and make their moves and get their capital equipment in there and continue to invest. But, that's where I come from.
Do you think companies will actually do that? Does this actually change the game? Or if we're talking a year from now, if we're looking at interest rates at 1.5%, does that change the game? What's the tipping point?
I think the change is not the quarter point. I think it's the fact you're going to have a steady rise in rates. And I think the signal is go ahead and get your balance sheet in order now, because it's coming, but make the investments. And I think that's really critical. As you know, I think there have been too many stock buybacks, and I think the balance sheet's got to stay healthy. And I think we need to start rewarding savings, not just rewarding debt.
Well, that's been the question, too, though. We have seen that banks are already going to start raising the rates that they charge for auto loans, for home loans, things like that. But they're not necessarily paying savers at this point to keep their money there.
Yeah, well, I think it's about time we start paying savers as well as corporations.
You wrote a very provocative piece recently about the mergers that have taken place over the past year, but really just even this last sort of quarter, and how you think that they are value destroying and terrible for the country. Dow, DuPont in particular was, I think, what inspired you the most recently.
Yeah. Well, I didn't say they're short-term value inspiring. What I said was we have to ensure that there's a continued investment in research and development internally and capital equipment. That's my big concern, is that companies get so concerned with combining that they aren't really focusing on building their business.
So we had Mike Pearson on recently, just 2 days ago. I think you hate Valiant for the most part.
Hate would be too strong a word, but
a business
I had a lot of questions about their business model, Andrew.
A business model but I think even if you thought the accounting was right, I'm not sure you respect the model unto itself. Right. And so the question that I have about interest rates and everything else, is that going to change what's going to happen here? Well, do you think that actually people are going to invest in the research because the economics are somehow going to be that much different? They're not really going to.
I think we need to get back to measuring them on that. I think so. Yeah. Now, Valiant's a case where they've been trying to do everything through price increases, and they've been excessive, in my opinion. You're going to see a lot of pressure in congressional hearings. This is an unfolding story. But Valiant, look, Mike Pearson is one of the great deal makers of this era. But now he's got to get back to operating the company. He can't just. He's got $18 billion in debt. He's got a low stock price. He can't just continue buy. He's going to have to run these companies, and that means they're actually going to have to invent drugs. What a original idea.
So as a healthcare CEO, though, would you be long or short that company at this point?
Well, as a healthcare CEO, I wouldn't be investing in that company, okay? But
because you think there's no value there, or because you don't?
I think it's a short-term play, and the short-term traders are going to make that judgment call better than I am. But I don't see the pipeline coming that's going to give them the fuel to growth. I would look at companies like Merck that have a much stronger pipeline.
Let me ask you, for Dow and DuPont, I mean, if they want to compete globally, which is why they're doing this, don't market forces cause you to continue to innovate and do research and development? Yeah. I mean, are you saying it's an oligopoly so that they somehow don't need to compete with each other anymore? I mean, since when did market forces were not sufficient to cause a company to do what's necessary to thrive in the future? And how would you change it?
Because they're forcing short-term actions, and research takes time. It takes them to make sure they make the investment.
When things are tough, you've always rationalized it, and that's the way things work.
Yeah,
people
that's fine.
People demerge. I mean, what's wrong, Andrew? You won't let him answer my question?
They've got to overcome the cultural differences here. And that'll be a big challenge.
So what would you do to prevent, you'd say don't merge?
No, I didn't say.
I didn't say.
I think they have to ensure they're making mistakes. They compete with a BASF, a Sinochem,
right. Well,
and
they got to innovate to do that. And
that's right. That's a long-term play. It's not just going to be you're going to get every quarter. It's going to be a nice, steady progression.
If you have a CEO that doesn't do that, then the stock's going to languish. The company's not going to do well, and he's going to be ousted, and market forces.
And I've talked to Ed Breen, Joe, and I think Ed understands this. It's a question: who are you going to put in charge of each of these companies? And are they going to bridge those cultural differences? And are they going to continue to make the long term? What happens when the pressure comes on? We aren't that far away from another recession. What happens when we hit a recession? You got to continue to invest in research.
Position if the recession comes, if they're together and rationalize some operations.
If they're only cutting back office things, if they're cutting R&D. Now, Breen says they're going to continue to invest. I want to see the long-term investment in R&D.
Here's a contrarian view on the R&D question, though, which is I was on the phone with a venture capitalist just yesterday who made the argument to me that actually the world has changed, that some of these companies like DuPont and potentially even healthcare companies that had these big R&D budgets and actually when it worked. But today, there's so much money in venture capital.
Smaller.
There's so many small. There's so much money flooding into venture capital, both in healthcare, in biotech, and all these other places, and that we haven't really appreciated how the economy has actually shifted, and that maybe the venture capital guys become the R&D departments, if you will. Or do you think that's just a completely bogus argument?
I don't think you can have a strong pipeline without having 70% inside, 30%. I love what the venture capital is. I want to see a lot more of it. I think it's terrific. But I think the corporation.
But the venture guy was saying that didn't exist 30 or 40 years ago, so you needed what you're talking about. But then you're not up with.
His theory is dangerous. That somehow corporations, we're not going to invest in corporations, spend money on research. This is a flawed theory. You've got to make the investments in research. All the great companies that sustain their growth over 1, 2, 3 decades do that. And so I don't think you can say everything's changed. We're going to just get it from bed. First of all, it takes them 12 years too. It's not like some kind of short-term thing. Yes, I believe, and you can do some off-balance sheet work. That's what they're talking about. So you don't have to have it in your balance sheet, and you don't have to hit your P&L. But I think you've got to make the investments internally. If you don't, look at Pfizer. They haven't made the investments. They've cut R&D, and now they have to go out and do more financial engineering. This is not the right thing to do.
Valiant had a slide yesterday in their presentation where they said that it's not how much you're spending, but how wisely you use it. And they actually quoted Apple's Steve Jobs saying that at the time that they invented the iPhone, that IBM was probably spending 100 times more in R&D than they were. So part of it's making sure you're investing. Part of it,
of course, it has to be. Yeah. But you have to create an innovation machine, Becky. That's what we did at Medtronic. Of course, you're always thinking about that, but it's not 3%.
Right.
It's more like 10% for medical technology and more like 20% for pharma. It's not, and you're not going to do it on 3%. I'll guarantee you. All you can do is some short-term product innovations on that amount of money. And the great companies you'll be looking at are companies like Amgen and Roche and Novartis and Merck and the companies that are making the long-term investments. That's why my former company now under new leadership is doing so well, because they're making the investments and it's rolling off the line. You see it coming. And I think Mike Pearson's going to have to get back to doing that if he wants a sustainable model, or he's going to be forced to spin off some businesses or do something to raise cash. And I would expect this is an unfolding story, and I think you're going to see a lot more. But I don't, Andrew, agree with that business model at all. I do agree with acquiring, though. Don't get me wrong. I think we should go to the venture capitalists, make investments in them. I believe in them being an industrial partner. Medtronic, at any one given time, we had 3 to 4 dozen of these investments. So, and some of the great things came to Medtronic, like the diabetes business, like MiniMed, but they're expensive, but it's okay.
Right. Bill, thank you very much for coming in.
Thanks for having me back.